Okay, so I guess now we have got 60 students. So now I'm going to begin today's class. So before that, make sure that all of you have marked your attendance in your attendance sheet, and all of you are also required to keep copy and pen with you guys, because today we are going to have some exercise as well. Okay, so to begin with, uh, in earlier classes, first let me know, am I audible to all of you or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. So, in the yesterday's class, we have seen message authentication code, and we have seen how exactly we can make the use of message authentication code and modification detection code in order to ensure the integrity and the authenticity of a message. Authenticity of a message means whether that message has been originated from the authenticate user or not. Okay, so that is what we meant by message authentication, and it was achieved with the help of message authentication code, right? Now, while studying message authentication code, you would have seen that we were applying some hash function in case of MDC as well as in case of MAC. In both the cases, we were applying some functions, some hash function, and with the help of those as functions, we were able to have a hash value or a message digest, right? So in the today's class, we are going to see how exactly those hash function works. Okay, so these are the objectives of the today's class, where we are going to get the general ideas behind the cryptography hash functions. Then we do have studied few schemes yesterday, and one of the major scheme is Merkle-Damgard scheme. And there are two basic structures or types of hash functions. The first type was to begin from the scratch, and the other type was based on symmetric block ciphers, right? Okay, so the most important thing or the most important point about your hash function is that no matter whatever is the length of your input message, it is going to create a message digest of a fixed length. Okay, so in this case, we do not design a function which will take the input having variable length. Rather, we design a function which will take the fixed input. Okay, and that fixed input will be iteratively processed again and again until the whole message length is met. So this is how these functions work. So obviously, yesterday as well we have discussed that there are two main hash functions which we are going to see, and those functions are Whirlpool and SHA-512. SHA-512 is the example of hash functions which have been made from scratch, and the Whirlpool is an example of the compression functions which have been created with the symmetric block ciphers, right? And this particular hash function SHA-512 has been derived from message digest family. So we do have discussed a little bit regarding message digest family yesterday as well. Okay, so this is a particular extension of MD5, message digest version 5. Okay, so before moving further, let us see this particular scheme. Okay, this scheme has laid the foundation for the other schemes. So in this particular scheme, as we have seen yesterday as well, that whatever original message we have got, first we need to break that message into number of chunks or into number of blocks. So in this case, we have got t number of blocks, right? So in case the message doesn't fit exactly into the smaller blocks, then we apply padding. So yesterday I got a few questions regarding this one, especially regarding this one. So Divanshu, are you there?
Yes, sir, I'm there.
So yesterday Divanshu posted me a question that, so what is the reason that why is the size of plain text and the cipher key is same in this particular scheme, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the reason behind that, it is not compulsory at all. The size of the message means, in this case, the size of this particular block may vary with the message digest. But in case if we have got the block size and the cipher key size same, in that case we do have the choice of encryption algorithm available with us. For example, you have seen many encryption algorithms earlier, right? You have seen AES, you have seen DES, you have seen ECC, you have seen RSA, so many. Okay, and the moment we talk about symmetric key ciphers, then the notable symmetric key ciphers were DES, double DES, triple DES, right? AES. So, in many cases, for instances, we do have the possibility. Again. Okay. So in many cases, we do have the possibility where the message block or the data block has got the equal size with the key cipher or the cipher key. Means the input data block and the key cipher are having the same length. Okay. So the moment if we have that sort of instance, in those instances, we can use this particular scheme where the input block size is same as the your cipher key. For example, AES. In AES, in general, in common, the size of the cipher key and the size of the your data block is same. For example, it may possible that we are using the input size, input data block size 128 bit and the key size also 128 bits. Okay. And in many cases, in new advances of AES, we do have the data block size of 512 bit and the key size as well 512 bit. And we all very well know that AES is much better than DES. So in this case, we are having the option of using AES. So this is why this particular scheme is better in instances or in cases where the size of the data block, incoming data block, and the size of the cipher key are same. Is that fine, Divanshu?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Because the moment we make the use of AES, then overall system will become very efficient. And in every mechanism, in every aspect of the cryptographic algorithm, we want our mechanism to be as efficient as possible. Okay. Apart from that, the second question which has been asked from Divanshu is that, sir, how exactly we are going to add the message length field? Am I right?
Yes, sir. You
Are
mentioned something about adding the message length
right,
in the padding section as well.
right. So I'll cover that part in detail in the later slides. Okay, I'll come back to your question.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so these were the fundamental building blocks of any hash functions, and we have seen each one of them in detail in the yesterday's class, right? So these are the intermediate your message digest blocks. Now we are going to start our first big hash function. We also call them as a hash algorithm sometimes. So your Whirlpool is an iterated cryptographic hash function, and it is based upon your Miyaguchi Pinel scheme that uses a symmetric key block cipher in place of the compression function. If you would have recalled in the first one, this is. Over here, we just mentioned that there is a compression function. We have not mentioned that how exactly this compression function is going to work or what is there inside this compression function. Okay, so now we are going to see how exactly we can create this compression function. Okay, so this particular technique or this block cipher is a modified version of AES cipher. Okay, and this has been purposefully done in order to make the overall process simpler. Okay. So this is the general view of your Whirlpool hash function. Again, we have got a message, and first of all, we have to make sure that whatever message we have got, we are going to convert that message into the odd multiple of 256-bit blocks. Okay, and the last block, the moment you add the last block into it, which is going to be of your message length block, then it will become an even multiple of 256-bit blocks. Okay, so Divyanshu, over here you can see that this is our message. Okay, this is our original message, and then we apply the padding to create the odd multiple of 256-bit block. So it will be started first by adding bit 1, then rest of the entries will be filled by entries zeros. All the zeros will be there. Okay, and this particular block will indicate the message, the length of the message. For example, if the length of the message is 120 bit, okay, or let's say 120, then 120 binary equivalent will be placed in this particular field. Is that clear, Divyanshu?
Yes, sir.
So this is the pre-processing part in Whirlpool hash function, where we need to process our incoming data, where we need to convert our data into equal number of blocks. Over here, the block size of 256 bits, right? So at the end, we have to have the even multiple of 256-bit blocks after padding and including message length field. Okay. Now we have got multiple blocks of 256 bits, right? And each block is going through certain number of operations. So the initial message digest will be initialized by all the zeros, and we call it as a H0. Okay. Again, these students keep coming. Okay. So the first message digest or the initial message digest is initialized by all the zeros, right? And this would be your first cipher key. Okay, this is going to be your first cipher key. So basically, let me tell you something a bit about Whirlpool. Basically, the Whirlpool was designed by Vincent Ridgman and Paulo Berato, and in this particular thing, as I told you, that it makes the uses of symmetric key block cipher in place of the compression function. And as a pre-processing part, I have already explained you that how exactly we process the original message so that we get the even multiple of blocks, right? Now, again, somebody has come. Okay. So in this case, this is going to be our data, means our plain text, and this is going to be our cipher key. And over here, we are going to use AES encryption algorithm. Not the exact version of AES encryption algorithm, rather we are going to use a tailored version of AES algorithm. Okay, and this one is the last variation of your Merkle-Damgard scheme, which was termed as Miyaguchi-Fresnel scheme, where we were having the feedback from feedback in the form of plain text as well as this initial digest or the previous digest to the next round. All are XORed together, then the result is passed to the next round. Okay, so this way it is prone to the most of the attack. Okay. Now, as I'm mentioning you that over here the encryption algorithm which we are going to use is the tailored one of AES. So let us see how exactly that AES algorithm has been tailored or has been modified in order to have this particular Whirlpool hash function. And of course, at the end of this overall process, we are going to get a message digest whose message length is going to be of 512 bits. Okay. So this is the general idea of the Whirlpool cipher. As you can see, it is very analogous to a AES where we have got n number of rounds. Over here, the n is 10, right? And we do have a pre-round transformation, and the input is your 512-bit plain text. And each round is having a different key. And how exactly we are going to have a different key? With the help of key expansion mechanism. And we have seen this mechanism in detail while studying AES. So each round has got its different key. And we do have a pre-round transformation. Okay. So at the end of the overall process, we are going to get a 512-bit ciphertext, right? Okay. And this is how we convert our bits into blocks, then blocks into a state. Okay. You would have recalled that in a similar fashion, we have done the same thing in AES as well, where all the messages first have been converted into bits, then bytes, then words, then the state. The only difference from AES, from the typical AES, is over here the arrangement has been done row wise. Okay, the arrangement has been done row wise. Okay, the placement of each output has been done row wise. While in case of AES, the placement was being done column wise. The values were being put up column wise. Okay, but in this case, the insertion and extraction is being done row by row. Okay, so this is the important point which you have to remember in Whirlpool hash function. Okay, and these are the formulas which you can use to put these values into a state, then from a state to put up in this format. Okay, fine. So this is the overall structure which includes all the 4 transformations which we have seen earlier as well in case of AES. So those 4 famous transformations here were byte substitution, shift, column, mix row, and add round key. So all of you are required to see this particular diagram and let me know the changes which you can observe. What changes you can observe from this diagram? You are supposed to compare this general structure with the general structure of AES.
Sir, here we are shifting columns rather than AES. We shift rows, and again, as in the third step in AES, we used to mix columns. Now we are mixing rows.
Exactly, very rightly pointed out that here as well a little bit tinkering has been done. In AES, we used to perform the mix column operation, right? And we used to perform shift rows operation, right? Okay.
Yes, sir.
But over here we are performing shift column and then mix rows. Okay, so the operations have been changed, and now this is how your byte substitution method works. Okay, over here, unlike AES, since we have done, we have seen the AES and ES, we do know that the design of S boxes involved a lot of effort, right? It did involve a lot of complicated procedure of the research and the analysis of other types of attack, and then they have come to some specified table which we call as a S boxes, right? But over here a different mechanism is incorporated to put up the values inside your byte substitution transformation table. So although we are not going to discuss how exactly we are getting these values, but let us assume that again in this case as well we have got a as box, and with the help of this as box we can substitute the bytes from this state. Okay, so this was all about your first transformation where we do have a S box, and with the help of that we are converting one state into another state, right? Now this is the detailing of your second transformation, which is your shift columns. Again, somebody has just pinged. Weber is there. Okay. So in this case, what is being done? In this case, this circular column shift is being done. Okay, so I guess there is no need to discuss this operation as well into detail because this is very simple. Now, mix rows. So it is also again pretty much similar to AES. One of the row is being picked, and this row is being multiplied with a constant matrix, and the result will be replacing the original entry of this state, and the same process will be applied for the rest of the rows. Okay, so this is how we do get the new state from mixed rows transformation, right? Okay, then again we do generate the different keys for each round with the help of this particular transformation, where we keep one of the entry and then we multiply it with a constant, then the result will take the place of the original one. So a similar type of thing or transformation or the operations we have seen in AES as well. However, the things or the computation over here in this case is quite simple or much simpler than the AES. So this is the overall working of Whirlpool cipher. Okay, so here we can see that this is the working from round 1 to round 10, and this is how the keys are being derived with the help of a round constant. Okay, this is one of the round constant. So these are the main characteristics regarding your Whirlpool cipher. The block size which we have got over here is 512 bits. The cipher key size is again a 512 bits, and the total number of rounds which we have is 10. And if you do include the pre-transformation round, then in that case the total number of rounds can be regarded as 11. Okay, and the key expansion is done using the cipher itself with the round constant as round keys. And these are the number of transformations, or you can say these are the transformations which we use in Whirlpool ciphers. Okay. Now this is the analysis of Whirlpool. So although the Whirlpool has not been extensively studied or tested, and it is based on a robust scheme which is Miyaguchi-Fresnel scheme, and for a compression function uses a cipher which is based on your AES block cipher, and a crypto system that has been proved very resistant to attacks. Okay, so this is the important point, that the moment you use this particular one, then overall hash function is pretty much secure enough, and it can resistant to various types of attack. And in addition, the size of the message digest is the same as for SHA-512. So in case of SHA-512, again we are going to get the message digest which will be having the length of 512 bit. That means the collision resistance will be very effective. So since this particular algorithm is also creating the message digest of the length 512 bits, that means it will be also very much resistant to the, or you can say this will also have the collision resistance. Okay. And there is one more very important point, that it may not be as efficient as SHA-512, and especially in cases when we are going to deal with the hardware. So if this particular scheme is being implemented in hardware, then it may not prove as efficient as SHA-512. So this is very important point which all of you should take a note. Okay. So this is what we have discussed regarding your Whirlpool hash function. Okay, so this is how the initial pre-processing of the message is being done, and at the end we do generate a message digest. Okay, I guess all of you will be very much clear regarding this one. Now we are going to begin another very important algorithm termed as SHA-512. Rupesh has pinged again. Okay. So let us start. Somebody else is maybe Mohammed Case. Mohammed Case is always late. He always ping very late. Okay. So as I told you earlier that your SHA-512 has been derived from MD5. Okay, and MD5 is the recent version of your MD family. So what I would recommend to all of you that you should study the MD family, the working of MD family, the formation of MD family, message digest family, so that you get good understanding of SHA-512. However, I'm not going to discuss the detailing of MD family. Okay. But let me describe you what happens in MD family. In MD family, we do perform certain number of transformation. In these transformation are being done in 3 to 5 rounds, and in each round we do perform certain number of steps, and in each step we perform certain bitwise Boolean functions. Notably, those bitwise Boolean functions are XOR operation, majority function, and if condition. Okay, so these are the bitwise Boolean operations which we use in MD family. Then we do consider 4 registers, and those 4 registers go through number of operations, and whatever data we have got, we convert that data into number of words. Let's say if the data size is 512 bit, then the total number of words which are going to be there are 16. Okay. Again, somebody has pinged Kameshwar Sahu. Okay, so the message has been converted into number of words, then that words is being stored into a number of buffers, then that buffer goes through the number of rounds, and in each round we do have number of steps, and in those steps what do we have? We have bitwise Boolean functions. We do have a particular function. Okay, in that function we perform certain number of bitwise Boolean operations or functions and the other things. Okay. And this was all about your MD4 hash function. And what is different in MD5 is that apart from, or rather than using your typical bitwise Boolean functions, we use some non-linear functions in MD5. Okay, so this is the major difference. And apart from that, we have 4 steps in MD5. In earlier cases, we were having only 3 steps. And in MD5, we do include a unique additive constant. So these are the few things. Apart from that, there is one more thing which you can add into MD5 is that it applies faster diffusion, and it do have a stronger avalanche effect. So these are the major things which are different from MD4. Okay. Now we are going to start to see the working of SHA-512. Just a moment. Okay, so this particular version is again based upon your Merkle-Deimgardt scheme. So this is how the arrangement of our message is done in this particular scheme, on this particular algorithm. Whatever message we have got, again we need to convert that message into number of chunks, or you can say into number of smaller block of size 124 bits. So the original message will be converted into number of equal sized block. Here the size of the block is 1024 bits. Then each block will go through a function. We call that function the compression function, which will be having two inputs. The first input is going to be your block itself, and the other input is going to be your intermediate message digest. So in the first step, your intermediate message digest will be carrying your initial values. Okay, and these initial values can be anything. So the output of this compression function is going to be of size 512 bit, which will again pass to the second step, and the same process will keep continuing till the last one. Okay, so same process will be adopted till the last step, and at the end we are going to get a message digest which will be having the size of 512 bits. Okay, so this is the general working of your SHA-512. Okay. Now, what can be the maximum message size in SHA-512? So in SHA-512, the maximum message length can be of size less than 2 to the power 128 bit. If the message is more than that, then this particular algorithm will not work. So in order to use this particular algorithm, you have to make sure that your message is less than this particular size. Okay, and this is a pretty big size. Even if you just try to pass this particular message over a network, then again you have to have a very good network. And at present, the message, or you can say the size of the network or the bandwidth of the network which we do have, even is not able to accommodate 2 to the power 64 bits. So this is a quite big number. Okay, so there is no need to worry. Even as of now, all the big messages, quite big messages, can use SHA-512 in order to create the hash values. So let us take one example. So in this example, the message length limitation of SHA-512 is not a serious problem. So, yeah, I guess we have discussed this one, right? Okay. So this is how we break our message. As we have discussed earlier as well, that whatever message we have got, we need to make sure that the message length is less than this particular size, right? And thereafter, if message is falling short of the multiple of 1024 bits, means the whatever message we have got, if you are not able to convert that message into equal number of block size of 1024 bits, in that case we do apply some padding, right, as happened earlier as well. So after applying padding, then we need to add the length of the original message as well. Okay, so at the end we will be having equal, you can say the multiple of 1024 bits in form of several n number of blocks. Okay, so let's suppose an example. What is the number of padding bits if the length of the original message is 2590 bits? This is the question, and in this question I'm telling you that the length of the original message is 2590 bits. Okay, can you tell me what would be the size of the padding? All of you, please do it. Okay, and this is what the thing should be done. And now I have given you the message size. Okay, please let me know what is the number of padding bits if the length of the original message is 2590 bits. I am waiting for your answer.
542 bits.
542. Okay.
482 bits.
414.
414.
Sir, 354 bits.
482 bits.
482.
482.
354.
354 bits.
354 bits.
482 bits.
Okay. Okay, just take few more minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. Just try to check your answers. Okay, if I just tweak this question in a way where I would like to know what is the number of zero padding bits. Then what?
353.
3?
353.
353. All are having the same number?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So your 353 is the right answer. Okay, and this is how the computations are being done. Okay, so this is the formula. Okay, so this can be derived like, let's say we have got M message. Okay, then we need to add some padding bits P. Okay, then again we need to compulsory add 128 bit, right? And all of them has to be equal to 0 mod 1024, right? So that the whole message can be divided into equal number of block size of 1024 bits. So mod has to come 0, right? So the moment you try to evaluate it for phi, this particular expression for p, then it will be your message minus n minus your length field mod 1024. So whatever answer will come, this will be your final answer. And since, as we all of us know, that before adding the padding bits, first we need to add one single bit, right? A single bit of 1. Then it will be followed by zeros. Okay, so this is how the padding will be done. Now there is one more question. Do we need to add padding if the length of the original message is already a multiple of 124 bits? The question is, do we need to add padding if the length of the original message is already a multiple of 124 bits?
Yes, sir.
We need to add.
Yes, sir. We need to add.
Okay, we need to add. And why do we need to add?
Length.
So because we need to add length also to make it a multiple of 1024, we need to add that also. Padding.
Right. Since this is the original message only. In this particular message, we have not added a length field as of now. Okay, so the moment you add a length field, then again you have to convert into the equal size block, where the block size is going to be of 1024 bits, right? So this is how the things are going to be done. Now the next question is, what is the minimum and maximum number of padding bits that can be added to a message? I am talking about a message where what is the minimum and a maximum number of padding bits that can be added. Here the block size is 1024 bits.
Minimum 0.
Okay, so the minimum is 0. Okay, good.
The maximum is 895.
So maximum is 895. 895 is not a correct answer. In the first case,
896.
yeah,
896.
is the right answer.
1023.
1023. This is the maximum length of the padding. This is the maximum length of the padding. Okay. So in the first case, if you talk about the last block, then the size of that last block is going to have to be 896 bits, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, fine. So I guess these things are clear to all of you, right? Okay, so I'll assume that you got the understanding of this padding. So the same things are there which we discussed. Just a moment. I'll come back to you. Okay. So I guess these things are clear to you. Now, as I told you earlier, that whatever message we have got, we first convert that message into equal number of blocks, and again we convert each block into number of words. So the moment we have got a block size of 1024 bits, then in that case we are going to have 16 words, where each word will be having 64 bits with it. Okay, so this way the whole block will be formed, and the size of the whole message block will be of 1024 bits. Okay, so the input block has got 16 words, and after the first round we are going to have a message digest which will be having a size of 512 bits. Okay, that means we are going to have 8 words, and each word will be having a size of 64 bits. So this is your input and this is your output after the first step. Okay, and this is what will be interested in at the last, the message digest or your hash value. Okay, so these are, you can call them register, you can call them buffers. Okay, so in different algorithms these things have been termed differently. Sometimes they are being treated as a register, sometimes they are treated as a buffers. Okay, now I want all of you to please write down or to note down this particular diagram as early as possible, and let me know when you're done with this. This is very important diagram. Okay, so in this particular diagram, what is being done? We are just expanding our words. Initially, how many words we were having? We were having 16 words. You can see in this diagram, right? Initially, how many words we have got? 16 words. And now in SHA-512, we need to have 80 number of words. How many? 80. So since we only have 16 number of words, then we need to generate the rest of the words from these words only. Okay, and this is the process through which we are generating the rest of the words. Okay, rest of the 64 words. So after having 16 words, this is how the next word is being generated. Okay, these are the formulas. Okay, rotation shift 187, rotation shift 1961 6. So these are the shift operations. Okay, shift operations on a particular word. Okay, on a particular word. Okay, this is the input word and this is the output of this operation. Okay, first we need to perform rotation shift by 1 place, then by 8th place, then by 7th place for 7 times. Okay, in this case, first by 19 places, then by 61 places, then by 6 places. So this is the sequence of a right shift, right circular shift. Okay, and this sequence has to preserve. So this is how we are generating the rest of the words. Okay, I hope all of you have noted down this diagram. So I am proceeding further. So this is one of the example. If we talk about word 60, so in case of word 60, okay, 60 minus 16, 44, right? Then the shift operations 187, right? Then in this round it is going to be 45. 60 minus 15. Okay, similarly, the rest of the words will be calculated. Okay, and when you perform the XOR of all these words, then you will get the final word. Okay, so this is how we create a word in this particular thing. Okay, now this is a compression function of SHA-512. Okay, so as we know that we need to have a compression function, and after applying some input, we do get a message digest from a function. So this is a general overview of that function, where we have got some initial message digest. So in this case, how many message digests we have got? 8. Okay, so all the message digest goes through certain number of rounds. In SHA-512, how many rounds are there? 80. Okay, so we have 80 number of rounds, and we pass each word in each round. Okay, for example, in round number 0, the word 0 will be passed. In round 80, the word 80th will be passed. Okay, and of course, all of them will be having a separate key. Okay, and all the first instances of these initial digest, or the value of initial digest, will be passed to the last round. Okay, so whatever output is there, or whatever values are there in the register or in the buffers of all these 8 words, those values will be XORed with the initial values, and then the final result will be stored in the final digest. Okay, so this is the general overview of the compression function in SHA-512. Okay, and these are the initial values of the first message digest of SHA-512. This one, A, B, C, D up to H. So these are the initial values. Okay, and now how exactly they have got these hexadecimal values? They got these hexadecimal values, or the initial values, by considering first 80 prime numbers. Okay, what they have done, they have just taken the first 80 prime numbers, then they have taken the cube root of all those first 80 prime numbers. Okay, let's say we have got 2, so the cube root of 2 will be evaluated, then it will be a value something like, let's say 1.478 something. Okay, and the moment you represent those value into hexadecimal equivalent, then the hexadecimal equivalent after the fraction is placed over here. Okay, I have included one example of that as well, and that example will be shown to all of you in the later slide. Okay, now these are the initial values which will place in this message digest. Okay, and thereafter, this is the structure of a single round in SHA-512. Okay, so these are the initial message digest. Okay, as I have told you earlier that the initial message digest values are assumed, okay, like this, and the moment you place all those values over here, then we can see for the next round some of the values are being passed as it is to some other buffers or some other register. For example, the value of A buffer has been passed to the B. The value of B has been passed to C. The value of C has been passed to D. And similarly, the value of many other buffers has been passed to some other buffers of the next round. Okay, but the values of A and buffer E are yet to be calculated or are yet to be added. Okay, as of now, only the values of 6 buffers have been added. Okay, and 2 have been left. And in this particular diagram, the values of these 2 buffer are being evaluated. The buffer A and E. Okay. So what is being done in order to calculate these 2 values? First, we gather all these buffer values up from A to H. Then all these buffers are going through some bitwise operations and mixing operations. Okay. So we do have 2 mixer 1 and mixer 2. In mixer 1, we have got 2 operations, majority operation and rotation operation, or you can say 2 bitwise operations. Okay. So in majority functions we have input ABC. In rotate operation we have input A. Okay, and the result of these 2 functions are XORed together. Okay, and in mixer 2 we apply conditional operator and a rotate operator, rotate function. Okay, and the result of these 2 operations are XORed along with the input word. Okay, and this will also include a key. So these 5 values will be XORed together. Okay, over here 8 is being added separately. So these 5 values are being XORed together, and this particular value is then XORed with D, and the resulting value is regarded as Y, which is nothing but your value of buffer E to the next round, this one. Okay, and the value of A is being calculated by XORing the output of mixer 1 and mixer 2. The moment you XOR these both values of mixer 1 and 2, then the result would be your X, which is nothing but the it is going to be the value of next buffer A. Okay, so this is how you calculate these 2 values, A and E, and this is how we perform these operations: majority operation, rotate operation, and conditional operation. Okay, so in majority operation, this is how the things are being done. In rotate operation, this is how the things are being done, and in conditional operator, this is how the things are being done. Okay, we'll understand each one of them with a suitable example. Okay, the rotate operation is pretty much simple. Whatever word we have got, first we need to write, rotate or right shift that particular word by this many number of positions. Okay, then in this particular whatever X we have got, we need to rotate right circular rotation by this many number of positions, and so on and so forth. And then we need to XOR all the values together to find out the final value. Okay, so this is all about your rotate operation. And in majority operation, it is again the combinations of AND and XOR operation. So in majority, first X and Y are being gone through some AND operation. I will see this particular one with a sort of example, so that will be better. Yeah, so these are the functions. Okay, and let's take an example of majority function first. Okay, so all of you can note these functions. Okay, the majority function, the conditional function, and rotate function. In majority function, A and B XOR B and C, then XOR C and A. Okay, just note down this one, the first one and the second one. Okay, then I'll give you some examples to solve it. Have all of you noted this one, these 2 things? Please note down the formula for majority function and conditional function. Have you noted down these 2? Anyone can reply me, huh?
Done, sir.
Okay. So I assume that you have noted these two formulas especially. Okay. Now, let's say we have got three buffers A, B, and C, and if the leftmost hexadecimal digits of these buffers are 7, A, and E respectively, then you need to calculate the leftmost digit of the result. Okay, so first you need to convert them into equivalent binary numbers. Okay, then whatever would be the things, those will be your A, B, and C. Then you need to apply the majority function, and then let me know what are the leftmost digit of the result. हेलो विशाल मैं भी क्लास ले रहा हूँ ना, मैं बाद में बात करता हूँ. बेटा मैं क्लास ले रहा हूँ 8 से वालों की, मैं बाद में बात करता हूँ. हाँ आधे घंटे बाद. हाँ ठीक. Yes. Let me know if you have evaluated these values.
E is the answer.
E is the answer.
E is the answer, sir.
Yeah, I can hear a few voices that some of you have done the calculation.
E is the answer.
Okay. So what are the values?
Sir, for majority, three values are 0, 0, 1, 0 and 1, 0, 1, 0 and 0, double 1, 0. That will result in triple 1, 0. That is E.
Okay. Okay. So I assume that all of you would have computed this one. So let me show the solution. So the moment we convert these values into the binary equivalent, then this would be the values, right? For 7 this one, for A this one, and for E 110, right? Then we'll take the first bit from each value, then we'll perform the majority. And it is very quite simple. If you talk about the majority, then whichever digit is in majority will be the answer. For example, in this case 0, 1, 1. So the majority is of 1. So the value would be 1. In the second case 1, 0, 1. So again the majority is of 1. So the value would be 1. Okay. However, you can also go through that formula. Okay. So that formula will also result you to the same value. So in the third bit, for the third place, the majority is going to be of 1, and the fourth bits, for the fourth place, the majority would be of 0. Okay, so this is going to be your E, right? So all of you, I guess, have got this value, right? Okay. Now, if we apply the conditional function for E, F, and G, which are having the values, hexadecimal values 9, A and F, then let me know the leftmost digit of the result. E is the answer.
E.
Okay.
E.
E is the answer.
Okay.
E is the
Okay. Good. So let me show the solution for this one. This is the solution. Okay. And this is again quite simple one. If you just put up the values into this one, so you will just get the values quite straightforward, right? And these are the 80 constant which have been used for 80 rounds in SHA-512. Okay, these are, and this is how the value for each and every round is being calculated. As I told you earlier, that for that, what they have done, they have just taken the first 80 prime number. Let's say the 80th prime number is this one. Then they have calculated the cube root of that number. Okay. Then the values after the fractional part has been converted into the binary. Okay, like this one. And then the equivalent hexadecimal values has been taken into consideration. And this is what is being taken as a constant. Okay, so these are all the values. These are all the values have been calculated in the similar fashion. Okay. So if we just try to wrap up the whole thing, we just try to analyze the working of SHA-512, then we will come to know that it is expected to be resistant to all the attacks, including your collision attack. Okay, and it generated a message digest of 512 bits, and it is planned that this particular version is an improved design, and it is much more efficient and more secure than all the other previous version. And we have seen the table of other versions as well, right, in the earlier slide, where we have seen SHA-2, 224, 384, right? So as compared to all the previous version of SHA-512, this particular one is standing quite well. Okay. And apart from that, if you just try to summarize all the things in your message integrity and the hash functions, then the conclusion which we have we can draw is that all the cryptographic hash functions should create or must create a fixed size digest, no matter the size of the message. And in order to create such a function, we can use the method of iteration, right? And compression function in that case will be repeatedly used to create a digest. And this particular scheme, where again the compression function is being used again and again repeatedly or iteratively, then this particular scheme can be termed as, can be referred as an iterated hash function. Okay, and one of the famous iterated hash function has been based upon your Merkle-Damgard scheme, right? And I guess this is all about your hash functions. So I hope all these things would be pretty much clear to all of you. Okay. If you have got any question, then you can ask me, or you can also write me an email. I'll reply to all of you. Okay. And this is a very important topic, and all of you must practice it. Okay. Yeah, this one. So in case if you have any question, then you can ask, and then I'll end the class. Apart from that, we do have a lab on Unix, Linux, shell scripting tomorrow, right? So Deepika ma'am will be taking that lab. Since the list of experiment and few to-do tasks has already been indicated, then you can do all those things. Okay, and in case if you have got any difficulty or any problem regarding running those scripts and all, then you can contact me or Deepika. Okay, during that time. Is that clear? Is that clear to all of you regarding the lab?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Whatever you do during that lab, during that time, please make all your working, all the experiments, all the programs to be done. Okay, all of you are required to do your lab during that time, and whatever are your experiment, please pass that experiment to Deepika. Okay, or what you can do, you can just create a common place and you can put all your program for that particular lab day with a roll number. Okay, so that your programs can be evaluated. Okay, you can also include one README file, which will include the detailing of your experiment, what exactly you have done. Is that clear? Okay, as a batch, please create a common space, and whatever you do, whatever practicals you do during that time, please upload it as a file. Please include some README instruction, what exactly you have done in that. Okay, and then keep your programs into it. Okay, so that the evaluation can be done. So I hope these things are clear from this class. Now I will end the class. Okay, if you have any doubt, you can ask me, or I'll stop. So should I close the class?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, then see you in the next class. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.